The annual 2022 annual budget town meeting. So thanks for coming. Thanks for participating. So I'll go ahead and call the meeting to order now. If you could all stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, at this time, I will call for the citizens to nominate a moderator for tonight in the form of a motion, please. Would anybody like to make the motion that Kershwin Singh be the moderator for tonight's meeting? We have a second. Second. All right, well, the motion passes. Kershwin, you are now the moderator.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to all those in person and online. Thank you very much for having me moderate the session. It's my first session, and I promised that I wouldn't make any jokes at all. So, in accordance with the town charter, the budget will be submitted to vote at referendum on Wednesday, May 11th, 2022, at the Avon Senior Center Community Room, 635 West Avon Road, Avon, Connecticut, between the hours of 6 a.m. and 8 p.m. I'd now like to call the town clerk, Nick Hogan, to come up. Nick Hogan, as town clerk, will act as a clerk of the meeting in accordance with the town charter and will read call of meeting. Nick?
Good evening. Thank you to everybody who's here in person and watching on the live stream, and thank you to everybody who's involved in this budget process. We know that it's a long, not so easy process every year. The call of the meeting, I'll be reading that tonight. The annual budget meeting of the electors and citizens qualified to vote in town meetings of the town of Avon, Connecticut is being held here at the Avon High School Auditorium at 510 West Avon Road in the town of Avon, Connecticut, tonight, Monday, May 2nd, 2022 at 7 p.m. for the following purpose. To receive and consider a resolution for the adoption of the 2022-2023 annual budget in the amount of $106,248,104. as recommended by the Board of Finance for the fiscal year commencing July 1st, 2022. Electors and citizens qualified to vote in town meetings were invited to attend this meeting in person here at the Avon High School. This meeting will also be live streamed via the internet. The link to the live stream and access instructions are available on the town's website. Electors and taxpayers wishing to provide public comment must be in attendance here at the Avon High School Auditorium. There will be no opportunity for virtual audience to provide public comment during this meeting. Pursuant to Section 9.4.1 of the Avon Town Charter, the annual budget meeting will be adjourned to a referendum on the aforesaid recommended budget to be held on Wednesday, May 11th, 2022, between the hours of 6 a.m. and 8 p.m. Electors and persons who are not electors but who are qualified to vote at town meetings will vote at the Avon Senior Center, 635 West Avon Road, Avon, Connecticut. Absentee ballots are available at the town clerk's office in the town hall. The aforesaid question will be placed on paper ballots under the following heading. Shall the annual town budget in the amount of $106,248,104 as recommended by the Board of Finance for the fiscal year commencing July 1st, 2022 be approved? Voters approving the proposed question will vote yes, and those opposing the proposed question will vote no. This This notice was dated at Avon, Connecticut, the 8th day of April 2022, and was signed by Catherine L. Salchert, the Chairperson of the Board of Finance.
I'd like to now call on Kathy Salkert, Chairman of the Board of Finance, to present the resolution.
How long has it been? 2 years since we've been doing masks, and I can't get it off. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The resolution states as follows. Shall the annual town budget in the amount of $106,248,104 as recommended by the Board of Finance for the fiscal year commencing July 21, 2022 be approved?
Go for a second and then move the adoption. Are there any seconds? Call for a second. The motion? Second. And I'll move for approval. Are there any questions or comments from any other members of the board? Are there any comments or questions from members of the audience? Oh. Go ahead. There's a question.
Hello?
Hi, for the record, my name is David Kavanaugh. I live at 11 Blueberry Lane. I've reviewed the information in the town newsletter. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought they called for questions.
Okay. So we're supposed to have a motion to adopt before the actual second. So does someone want to make the motion to adopt? Thank you. And Deb has seconded, just to get that correctly stated on the record. Should I begin the presentation at this time? The Board of Finance? Okay. You ready? Okay. Next slide, please. As you can see, the Board of Finance balances the requested amount for spending with the required level of revenues to pay for these services. The proposed budget for the fiscal year 2022-2023 would require a 1.17% mill rate increase. The mill rate will increase from 34.21 mils to 34.61 mils. Next slide, please. The Board of Finance considers the factors listed here, including the input from the Town Council and the Board of Education, public hearing comments, economic conditions, and other related interests that are stated here. Next slide, please. The recommended budget summary is broken down here between the town operating, Board of Education budget, debt service, and capital improvement and sewers. You can see the breakdown here. The town operating budget is increasing by 3.47%. Board of Education side of the budget, 3.04%. Debt service is down this year. Capital improvement is much higher, and as you already know, that's partly because it includes money that is included, that is being paid by the American Rescue Plan Fund Act, so that the total overall increase of the combined budgets is 4.92%. Next slide, please. This slide shows how the level of service will be funded. Non-tax revenues amount to $13,352,709. Taxes and assessments make up the bulk of the funding, $92,895,395. Next slide, please. This slide shows new money raised by growth in grand list. The net grand list for the prior fiscal year was $633,032. The increase is shown there. It's 2.5% increase, and the total increase in the grand list is $2,296,843. Next slide. This slide shows the grand list changes from the 16-17 fiscal year up to fiscal 2023. Note in 1920 fiscal year, that was due to the revaluation. Next slide, please. This slide shows the changes in the mill rate. And you can see from the asterisks, again, the mill rate went up appreciably in the years where we had revaluation. Next slide. And here again, just to give you another chance to look at this, is the recommended budget summary. Next slide. As was already mentioned, the vote will be on Wednesday, May 11th, at the Senior Center. The voting booths will be open from 6 a.m. until 8 p.m. Absentee ballots are available at the town clerk's office, and you can go to the town clerk's website to get information on the absentee ballots. Thank you.
Are there any comments or questions? Hi, I'd now like to ask Mr. Polhamus, Chairperson of the Town Council, to present.
All right, well, thanks, Kirsch. Hello, everybody. Thanks for taking the time to join us tonight. We really value community engagement in this process. So, again, really thank you all for taking your time to tune in. Developing the budget's really a year-round process. Both the elected officials, town staff, we've all worked hard on this since, September of last year, really. So tonight, you just heard from the Board of Finance. I have other town council members here who have participated heavily in the creation of this budget. We have Anthony Weber, if you want to give a wave, Barb Osceola, Heather McGuire, and Jason Indomenico. Also, we have Brandon Robertson sitting here in the front row, our town manager, and Tom DeStasio, I believe, is around here somewhere as well, and also, there you are, Tom. And Grace. Grace has been instrumental in all this as well, and I think she's manning technology in the back right now. So big thanks to all of them for their help in putting this together. Next slide, please. So, we all love Avon, and we are all honored to serve you and continuing to make Avon a place that we love to call home. It's a great place to live. We aim to keep it that way. At the very base of our process, the mission remains the same: is to provide quality town services at a reasonable cost to all the citizens and taxpayers. Next slide, please. So this slide shows the total proposed budget for 2022-2023. The Board of Education will speak to their funding request later. Not including the operating budget of the Board of Education, The town sewer capital and debt service budgets total $39.7 million. This equates to an increase of about $3 million or 8.2% over the current year budget of $36.7 million. The increase to the town operating budget, not including sewers, capital, and debt service budgets, is 3.47% or $949,000. Costs related to the sewers are funded by separate fees and assessments, and we'll break this down further in coming slides. So, not including the Board of Education's operating budget, the top three activities funded by the town's operating budget are public safety, including police, the Avon Volunteer Fire Department. This is about 34% of the operating budget. We also have public works. This includes roadways, machinery and equipment, buildings and grounds. It's about 20% of the operating budget. And then we have general government, which is the town manager, finance, assessment, revenue collection, and information technology, which is about 11% of the town operating budget. Next slide. So the plan for allocating resources is really structured around the town council's three key objectives as we reviewed the fiscal year 23 operating and capital budgets. First of all, we want to maintain capital budget funding levels. There's an emphasis on road improvements with this, as well as municipal buildings and grounds and school facilities. I'll speak to the capital budget in a few minutes, as I think that's something everybody tends to focus in on. Our second objective is to sufficiently fund our long-term liabilities. Our defined benefit plans were closed to new employees in 1997. This budget actually provides 100% of the annual required contribution for these plans to be funded. And then third, our final strategic objective is to ensure that we properly fund our core services. We continue to focus on delivering high-quality core government services with a focus on public safety. And I actually want to take a second to emphasize this point. We absolutely focus on the quality of public safety. We have received a few comments over the last few weeks about how this budget is presented in the town newsletter, and how it may give the impression that we have slashed millions of dollars from the public safety and public works departments. We have neither a magic wand nor the desire to do anything of the sort. Historically, contributions to the pension trust and OPEB, as well as life and long-term disability premium payments, were included in the departmental budget allocations. So, as these items don't pertain to active employees of the town, we have consolidated those under a separate category for this year's budget. That category is employee benefit funding. It actually shows up in the miscellaneous category on your budget sheets. I think you can actually see this if you everybody's handout. If you take a look at your handout, we have this is page 2 on the handout, II2. And you can see there's a miscellaneous line under expenditures that has gone from $430,000 up to almost $6 million. Again, that's all the OPEB and the defined benefit. Those have all been moved out of the departmental operating budgets. And so again, in order to head off any questions later on, we're not slashing public safety. We value the public safety very much. And there's no plan at all to do anything like that. Next slide, please. So operating budget increases at a glance. As mentioned earlier, the town, sewer, capital, and debt service budgets have a proposed total increase of about $3 million, or 8%. Around $2 million of that increase is in the capital budget, with the remaining $1 million coming out of the town operating budget. The operating budget itself consists of 3 categories: personal services and supplies, and capital outlay. The personal services and wages comprise about 75% of the operating budget for the town. The town of Avon is a service organization, so it should be no surprise that the primary budget driver is people here. So So approximately $305,000 is due to increases in salaries and wages. This budget requests about $117,000 to fund new positions in finance, assessing, building, recreation, and police records that were added in fiscal year 2022, but were unbudgeted. The full financial impact of those positions is actually mitigated by eliminating 3 part-time positions and 1 full-time position. There's also been an increase in medical insurance of $207,000. This includes medical insurance waivers, employer contributions to the high deductible health plan. We also have an increase in retiree health of $83,000 to support active retirees and to pre-fund future retiree health care costs. And then finally, we have this increase in computer operations of $77,000. This was recommended to us by our IT vendor, and a lot of it has to do with moving to hosted email services as opposed to hosting it locally, and having to maintain hardware and software ourselves. Okay, next slide. Thank you. All right, so capital budget. All right, so we have about $5.3 million in the capital budget this year. As a reminder, any items with a minimum value of $20,000 and a useful life of more than 5 years are included in the capital budget. The capital budget for all funds has increased by $2 million when compared to fiscal year 21. This includes $1 million for road improvement projects from the American Rescue Plan Act, and also $240,000 from state grants. It also includes about $567,000 for sewer projects funded by the sewer fund. Again, those projects don't impact the tax rate. The general fund CIP has increased about $550,000 year over year. Some highlights from this list. Again, this $1.2 million for road improvements is a big new one, and I'll talk about that in a second. We also have $555,000 for the expansion of the town clerk's vault. That might seem like a lot for a vault, but you have to realize that these specifications for these vaults come from the Secretary of State, and they involve a lot of building materials, extra thick walls, things like that. We also have $546,000 for vehicle replacements, including a new dump truck in the highway division, 2 new police vehicles, and a replacement vehicle for the engineering department. We have $540,000 for improvements to Countryside Park, $525,000 in Board of Ed projects, including a notification system at Pine Grove, and there's an emergency generator at Roaring Brook. There's also $313,000 to reimburse the general fund unassigned fund balance for the purchase of 503 West Avon Road. This is a property right across from the high school. There's no plans for that at this moment, but it's just obviously a strategic location, and the previous council decided it would be wise to purchase that given proximity to the high school and fire department facilities. Next slide, please. Okay, so I mentioned we have this new large expense for road improvements, and given the increase in these expenditures, it's worth discussing how we project the maintenance of Avon's 112 miles of local roads. Really, they're our most valuable capital asset. So since 2007, we have a third-party consultant called the Beta Group. They prepare and update a pavement management program for us, for the town. It was most recently updated in October 21. We utilize this program as a systematic tool to prioritize and manage the road improvement projects. The goal is really, to provide the traveling public with acceptable pavement conditions at the least life cycle cost. And in general, our approach is to implement the least costly and labor-intensive method while improving the existing condition of the roadways, prolonging the life of the roads, and preventing the need for more intensive maintenance techniques. So critically, according to Beta and the pavement management plan, our backlog is pretty significant. It's around $19 million, $18.8 million, and they've they say it'll take about $10 million to get back to a good maintenance level. So the larger this backlog gets, the more we spend on critical rehabilitation versus just preservation of the roads. Beta says there's about a 6 to 10 times difference in the cost between rehabilitating and just preserving. So we're told we need to be spending around $1.8 million per year over 5 years to get, or about $1.5 million per year over 10 years to get back to our target. Historically, our spending is a small fraction of that. So, $1.5 million for 1 year of road work. This is substantially higher than our typical allocation. And so really, like, we were thinking of this year as a test of how much road work can the town handle, how much road work can Public Works handle, how much road work can our residents handle, and how disruptive is that to their daily lives. So we need to figure that out because, moving forward, so we're using a sizable chunk of ARPA funds this year to make a dent in it. If we can handle this, we'll probably be looking at issuing debt in future years to go ahead and catch up so we can get into a cheaper year-over-year cycle of maintenance rather than rehabilitation. Next slide, please. Thanks. So tax relief programs. So we regularly review tax relief programs. That's our tax relief program that's available to the seniors or disabled, as well as for veterans. And they are on an income-based scale, as I think you'll see in the next slide. In December 21, the council reaffirmed the income eligibility threshold of $61,800. This benefit increases annually with the increase in the tax levy. Take an opportunity to review the tax relief programs that are available, and feel free to reach out to the assessor's office if you have questions about this. So here's our income limits compared to some of the other towns, and you see we are near the top and competitive, which is probably fitting given a pricier housing market. So next slide, please. All right, so to see up-to-date information, all of this is on the website. We have the budget on the website, and it's a great document. It's pretty easy to read through. I think I've been doing it for a few years now, so it's just a little easier. But you can also, at www.avonct.gov, you can sign up for receiving email alerts of all the upcoming meetings or just general activities around town. So I strongly encourage you to do that. My final thoughts are that this budget reflects 8 months of hard work to arrive at a budget that really balances competing needs and provides a significant value for our town's investment. We always aim to provide the citizens of Avon with a safe, well-managed, culturally enriched, and fiscally responsible community. We strive to satisfy the needs of all in our community, maintain infrastructure, and be good stewards of our town as we look forward to the next generation. The decisions that go into creating this budget are never taken lightly. From the office staff to the department heads to the town manager and finally the elected officials, we take spending the taxpayer money very seriously. We believe that the budget presented today reflects what is truly needed for our town to sustain us and put us in an excellent financial position for the years ahead. So thank you again for participating tonight. Your support in this process is really critical. So I hope to see you and on May 11th, and I hope you'll support this budget. Thank you.
I'd like to invite Deb Shute, Chairperson of the Board of Education, to come up and present, please.
Thank you, Kirschman. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening. It's nice to be in person again with all of you. I'd like to take a moment to introduce the Board of Ed members as well as administrators that are in attendance. And I'll just ask that when I say your name, raise your hand and wave for those who might be seeing you for the first time. So I am Deb Shute. I am the chair of the Board of Ed. Jay Spivak, our vice chair. Jeffrey Fleischman, our secretary. Jackie Blea is absent this evening. Laura Young is joining us remotely. Lynn Katz, Thage Singh, Lisa Seminara, Liz Summercorn. And I'd also like to thank our administrators who worked very hard to establish this budget. As soon as this one passes referendum, we'll be working on the following year's budget, so it takes a lot of time and effort. I would like to acknowledge that we have our business manager, Susan Russo, with us. Thank you, Susan. Our Director of Human Resources, Roberto Medic. Thank you. Our Assistant Superintendent, Dr. Donna Nessel-Rusak. And through the use of technology, we have our Superintendent, Dr. Bridget Carnamola, joining us remotely this evening to present our budget to you. I will throw it to Bridget. All set, Susan? All right.
Thank you, Ms. Shute. And if you can't hear me, I assume someone will tell me that. First, I would like to thank our IT folks for the assistance. Unfortunately, I'm currently quarantined, or I would have been there with you in person tonight, and I still wanted to be able to figure out how I might participate and do the presentation even in physical absence. So I appreciate you working with me to be able to do that. Again, thank you to our Board of Education for your work with us over the past year in putting this budget together and ultimately approving it in January. Likewise, thank you to our administrative team as a whole, all of our department heads, and faculty and staff that were part of this process. As you've already heard Mr. Polheima say, and Ms. Shute, this is a process that begins long before we're here tonight. Go to the next slide for me, please. Thank you. We start everything that we endeavor to do with looking back at first our mission to anchor our work and also our blueprint for excellence. I'm not going to read this to you. You can see it, I'm sure, but basically our main responsibility is to educate our students and to, as we see it, make it a joyous and excellent opportunity for them to continue to pursue their interests and personal integrity, social responsibility as they graduate, and hope that they continue on with a passion for learning. Next slide, please. These are just a few highlights of our accomplishments over the past year. I think it's nice when we can pause for a moment and recognize some of what we utilized our talent and resources to do to make our students into the best possible graduates they can be, whether that's academics, a combination of academics and the arts and athletics. We, as you can see, have had a number of exciting things happen over the past year since we last spoke about this. Susan, Grace, if you could, thank you. So our overall increase to the ask, if you will, not including the grossing up, you saw a different number on the previous slide. And as a reminder, when we present our budget to the town, it is our request for funds, but it is also the offset of funding that the town will receive. So our ask for funds is an increase of 2.75% over the 21-22 school year. We also have increases in fundings and some sources of grant funds, which I'll try to differentiate tonight. If you can go forward more for me, please. Thank you. Our budget process, as I said, takes us quite a bit of time to first, we want to establish our priorities from year to year. We don't just roll things forward. We identify the priorities based on our strategic plan, which is referred to as our blueprint for excellence. And we start putting those pieces together on paper in October. And we continue to refine that through the administrative team and ultimately the Board of Education before we get here to you tonight after the Board of Finance recommends us to move forward, which is now almost a month ago. If you can move forward, please. Thank you. Just as a way to show you the overall, what we would call the drivers, this is how the increase shakes out. So in other words, what's driving the 2.75% increase? 57.75% of that 2.75 is salaries. Just below that, tuition, supplies and equipment, utilities, and down, as you see, to the overall increase. So to be clear, this is just one way of looking at it so that you can differentiate between how that 2.75% is divided up to be able to see the most impactful drivers. Next slide, please. A different way of looking at it. This is just a big picture way of looking at it so you can see how the budget is distributed. This is in line with what we see in most years and in most towns. We're looking at a Board of Ed budget. Just around 80% is usually salary and benefits. And once again, we're just a little bit below that with 79.35% of our overall budget being salaries and benefits. And then again, as you see, the rest of the distribution, some of those, as you can see, match up the same as the drivers do. If you could go one more for me, please. So I know tonight is the more brief version for the hearing, so I will just touch upon a few pieces to ensure that it all makes sense in case we have folks with us tonight that have not seen this before or maybe not had a chance to review it, but it certainly will be available for more questions. That said, I wanted to, again, mention that we anchor the budget development in our strategic plan, our blueprint for excellence. Our main focus area, of course, is student learning. There are 4 focus areas. Our second is personal growth and relationships. If you could move forward for me, please. Communication and partnerships, and how we develop both internal and external partnerships to keep a clear communication and transparent process, make community partnerships for students to be able to have internships for the kinds of things that you see go through the PTO and the donations that we receive and the many ways that we work to partner both with Avon and the greater community in the state. And finally, of course, our systems, we're always looking to maximize our resources and continue to refine our processes and systems to make sure we are as efficient as possible in all ways, including in our finances. Next slide, please. So again, know that our budget goals, therefore, are directly related to those. Go to the next slide. So in our first goal this year, we're talking, of course, about student learning, focus area 1. And you'll see on the next few slides, I wanted to be clear because there's been a lot of conversation both in town and of course state and nationwide related to different types of grant funding, particularly in the last couple of years related to the pandemic and the American Rescue Plan Act. So I wanted to be clear how we were funding pieces of these increases from the general budget, in other words, through local tax dollars versus grant funding. So on the screen in front of you now, you see several positions that we needed to add into the budget. I'd like to point out that the first 3 that you see, both an elementary school teacher, a part-time social teacher, science teacher, which was adding on to a position that existed already, just another 0.2 piece of a position added to that for course needs at the high school, and also another full-time special education teacher. Those first 3 were actually added into the budget that we are living in right now. We had to reallocate funds to be able to meet those needs after last year's budget was approved by the town. As you can see, due to enrollment, course needs for students at the high school, continued needs in our special education arena district-wide. And then the last 2, the full-time world language teacher is in the coming year's budget, so is the wellness teacher. Again, I wanted to be clear that you'll see these as an increase, even the first three, because while we have them in our current budget, it is after the budget was developed and therefore approved by the town. So as we move them forward into the 22-23 year, and you go line by line, you would see that those three positions exist and are a piece of the increase in the salaries. So the world language teacher, we've had increasing numbers of students needing particularly Spanish between the middle school and the high school. Part of that is, as you may remember, the reduction of the Chinese program. We had a lot less students signing up for Chinese, so we've had more students needing, therefore, to move over to Spanish, both at the middle school and as they move on to the high school. And we've had very large section numbers in both places. So that is a full-time position that we will split about half and half between the middle and the high school. The wellness teacher, we've had to add in an additional course at the high school, which we've spoken about several times in terms of graduation requirements. That's a health and safety piece that has been added on to the health curriculum. And also we needed another just about half-time position at the middle school for the enrollment, because as I mentioned also with world language, if you look at the class sizes that we have seen this year and next year that we are looking at the middle school, we've got a couple of what we call bubble years of students where there are higher numbers of students in both 7th and 8th grade. If you could move one more forward, please. Sorry, I'm trying to also toggle between two screens. Also related to student learning, but these are two areas in which we had been funding from the ESSER grant, which is pandemic related. We had them in that grant funding over the past year. An ESOL teacher, that is a English as a second language teacher. We added in that position with grant funding initially. However, we know that as we continue to see the increased number of English language learners, that is a need for a permanent position. And rather than put ourselves in a place where when this grant funding runs out, as we all know, has happened in some cases already and will continue to happen over the next year, we didn't want to create a fiscal cliff as a result of the grant funding. So we have moved that position from the grant into the general fund. Likewise, teaching assistants that we utilize at Pine Grove and Roaring Brook that we had originally in our ESSER grant funds, we have moved into the general budget, knowing that we will also continue utilizing those teaching assistants in the elementary grades, particularly at least for the foreseeable future, for the next year or two, based not just on class sizes, but also on the continued changing needs and landscape that we've been managing since school has returned to full in session after the closure and a number of students remaining out remote last year, many staying out on homebound. As students, as you can imagine, have returned to school, we have continued to work hard to meet the needs, whether that was in terms of some learning losses and us trying to accelerate learning or social emotional needs, which you'll see in mental health needs, which you'll see in another piece. So the net cost to us by moving those from the grant to the local budget, as you can see, is $154,246. And thank you. You can go to the next. This, to be clear, is in our IDEA grant, which is federal funding related to the Americans with Disabilities Act. We had to add in an additional section in the current year for pre-kindergarten, a whole section related to both increased enrollment in pre-K, but also additional student needs. And adding one full section means one teacher and two paraeducators for that classroom. So we already were utilizing grant funds to do that. We will continue to do that in the coming year because we will need that section again. Keep moving. Focus area 2, personal growth and relationships. In the current year, we already have a full-time school counselor added in to the Avon High School, and we are funding that through the ESSER grant. In the current year, we will continue that next year, and after that, we will assess whether or not that needs to go to the general budget. On the other hand, something that we have been talking about for years in district was the need for an additional social worker. And we have currently a position that is split between Thompson Brook School, which is the 5-6 school, and the middle school, the 7-8 school. And that is one position, one person that goes between both of those buildings, which has been difficult to manage the entire time that we have split the position between the two buildings. And over the last few years, it has gotten more and more difficult to manage having only the one social worker because, again, we've seen an increase in the student needs, the amount of risk assessments that need to be conducted by social workers. And as I have been heard to say, and I know the administrators have also at Thompson Brook in the middle school, when a student may be in crisis, isn't dependent upon whether or not someone's schedule has them in one building versus the other. So unfortunately, we have had to move folks around quite a bit to try to meet the needs. And moving forward, we know that that's not going to continue to work for us. And we'd rather not subcontract and pay additional money to meet students' needs by way of mental health when we are doing our best to do that with our own staff in the districts during the course of the school day. Outside of the school day is another situation, but during the day, we have a number of plans that we need to meet the needs of our students for both personalized plans for students, groups of students, and as you can see, some of the emergencies that come up, such as risk assessments that social workers are qualified to do while others are not. So instead of utilizing the grant funds, we are funding this from the general budget, again, because we don't want to create the fiscal cliff. This is something that was put in the budget on our end several times, and we, as an administrative team, we moved it the last couple of years before presenting it to the board. Talked about it with the board, but we moved it because we were, as you know, each year trying to keep this increase at a minimum. And finally, as we move forward into the 22-23 year, we know that the needs have become too great and we can no longer meet them without adding in this position. If you can go to the next slide for me, please. Our health insurance and our OPEB and pension, you heard Mr. Plamas speak a little bit about that also. In both of these areas, we've actually seen an overall decrease, nearly $500,000. There are several reasons for that. The most the largest driver, I would say, of that is that in the past few years, at least, which is starting to see a turnaround now, but the market was doing well. So we've had favorable fund performance. We've had lower utilization of health insurance. We've also, as part of our goals, worked to make changes during contract negotiations to change employee contributions and funding levels. And on the other hand, also on the OPEB and the pension, we've had decreased contribution requirements on top of the projected fund growth. So this has been a good offset for us to be able to move some of the other needs forward this year. Just wanted to bring this up because we have spoken about this in the past. It is a zero net increase to the budget, but if you go in line by line, you would see that we did add in this position, the Senior Technology Support Specialist, in the year that we are actually in, and we figured out a way to ensure that it did not have a budgetary impact in the coming years by reallocating some of our funds. The technology hardware, this is a net increase, this $47,117, because there has been grant funding associated with technology that we have made the most use of possible. We have also gone from leasing all laptops and Chromebooks to purchasing them because it was better for the district and the town financially. So some of this that you see in our budget is a changeover from the lease to the purchase. And so again, that's why it's a net increase of $47,117. If you go to the next slide for me. Keep going. I want to point out thank you. We have additional information with us in terms of breaking out the line by lines. I believe you have them starting the next slide. Am I correct? If you go one slide further, or no, do we have them? Okay, so we have them with us in the case there are additional questions, because there are many lines of finances that we knew would be difficult to see on screen. So if there are any additional questions, I know Ms. Russo is present in the audience also. I don't think I'm going to be able to, from a technology standpoint, be able to answer the questions remotely, but I will be here and communicating with Susan for the questions that we may have from the audience. And thank you again for figuring out how to make this work for me, as I'm forced to stay at home, whether that's what I would like to do or not. Certainly a lot easier to present in person. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Carnamola. We appreciate you getting online and presenting, and I hope you feel better very soon. At this time, I'd like to ask the Town Council to return to the stage, please. Are there any other town officials who wish to comment? Being none, I'd like to open this up to comments or questions from the audience. Who would like to come up first? Before you start, please state your full name and your address.
Let's try this again. My name is David Kavanaugh, 11 Blueberry Lane. So what I've learned in this meeting and in the hours leading up to this meeting actually is regarding the reporting change in which a large amount of employee benefit costs were lumped together to form the 5.4 million. What had happened was, over time, people had called me and said, you got to look at these numbers, you got to look at these numbers, something crazy is happening. And I looked, and at first glance, it looks like there's $5.4 million worth of new expense, and then a number of other departments are reduced. And my first thought was, well, something crazy has happened in Hartford, and they're trying to balance the budget based on some $5 million bomb that was dropped on them by the legislature. But there was no proof of any of that. So I'm pleasantly surprised to see in all of this that all we really have is a reporting issue. From the perspective of what a taxpayer looks for when they look at the town newsletter and they review the numbers in the budget, what they're really going for is to see, what is it, department by department, are we keeping services pretty much intact? And if there are increases, what are they and what are they for and what do the changes mean? So this year's report was a little difficult to read in that regard, and that caused a lot of panic, and my phone lit up like a Christmas tree, and there's all these people saying, you gotta look at this, you gotta look at this. So anyway, I'm pleasantly surprised to see that everything looks pretty good. I was on the Board of Education as of a year ago, and so I looked at that, and if we look at the entire town budget, it seems to be well within it's well within the current rate of inflation. So I don't really have a complaint there. So upon further review and going through the information, I was pretty happy with what's here. So that's really all I have. But in the future, just to understand what people are looking for when they look at these numbers, they are looking for year over year, department by department, to see what those services look like. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that comment, David. I think it's spot on, and I think we probably could have done a better job in the newsletter of highlighting that. But for anyone following, and if you really want to dive in a little deeper, look at the budget document starting on page C4. And going through, I think, the end of the expenditures, there's really a very in-depth discussion of this. So yeah, it's a great point. It is what people look for line by line. And again, I think we probably could have done a better job in the newsletter of it, but you can find everything you're looking for in the budget document.
Thank you, David. Any other questions from the audience?
Mark Gantner, 20 Brookmore Road. Could someone explain what we're going to get for $500,000 at Countryside Park?
That's a great question. This is a discussion that's been going through the Recreation Parks Commission for a little while now. It's actually a priority of Ruth Checo's, and it's a priority of the towns at this point. The existing building is in bad shape. It is time for an update. We've discussed doing a complete renovation, a tear down, and reconstruction, and I think that, correct me if I'm wrong, Brandon, but I think that came out to $800, maybe almost $900,000. Whereas the renovation, and this is an estimate from an architect, our architect is working on this plan. There's more detail in the minutes about it. You can see detail on the plans of what you're going to get, but it's a total renovation of the space, a complete ground-up renovation of the space. I get more detail than that. Is that enough detail for you, or would you like more? Sorry, I didn't.
When will we see the details?
We can point that out. We'll make an addendum to some of the presentations tonight and point it out where you can find it, or we can email you. Yep.
Any other questions?
My name's Tom Voorhees, 29 East Woodhaven Drive. I think my question has been answered by the first question tonight, but I'm just looking for assurances that our police department is not being reduced by 25%, and I assume it's just a line item transfer of the expenses.
Yeah, no, that's correct. I think the overall budget has gone up, not in a big way, actually. It's not one of the bigger increases this year, but it has gone up. We're not reducing any services on the police side. And in fact, we're welcoming a new chief in July, I believe. July. So yeah, it's exciting times to come for the police department. Yeah.
Other questions? Okay. Seeing that there's no further questions from the audience, I would like to thank the Board of Finance, the Board of Ed, and the Town Council, as well as Dr. Karnamola. We all recognize the amount of effort and hard work and time commitment that all of you put into this, and we definitely appreciate it. So just a reminder, the budget will be submitted to vote at referendum on Wednesday, May 11th, 2022, at the Avon Senior Center Community Room, 635 West Avon Road, Avon, Connecticut, between the hours of 6 a.m. and 8 p.m. Thank you all for your attendance. No further comments or questions. I would now close the meeting. Take a motion to close the meeting. Second. Meeting adjourned. All in favor? Aye.